Yo, 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 visualize shark takes, hit the wave grinding. In the chat, gun shark odds make it rhyming. Sunday vibes, smooth bets, no confining. Hats engaged, can't stop us from shining. Bet on the spread, liking it, keep it tight. Push the odds further, jack on the hindsight. Odds fellows mind grasping the right sight. Hats, caps on heads, winners in plain sight. Hit the light, get in the chat, feel the flow, cash it, every dollar see the bank roll. Sunday grind and picks, now you gotta know. Extra points on the screen, sharp minds always glow. Big parlays, predictions we hold. Standing tall, betting knowledge all.
On a suddenly not so casual Saturday in January, it is NFL, the extra points, the big show, divisional weekend part 1. It is Saturday, January the 18th, 2025. The Shark, the Gun, and the Odds Fellow right here live on Shark Water Station, X and YouTube, and the Guns Picks channel. A special show for you guys on Saturday. The best football weekend of the year, in my opinion. Top 4 teams from both conferences. We saw a lot of blowouts in round 1. This is going to be much better football this round. Guns Picks, what's going on, brother?
Man, I am excited now. This is just going to be a beautiful weekend, not only for college basketball, NFL divisional round, and I am excited for it. We got 2 games today. We're going to give you 2 games tomorrow. A little bit of props, a little bit of size, a little bit of totals, and we have the odds fellow who's got a full schedule today, as he told us offline, but he is here joining us today. What's going on, my friend? How you doing?
Tight windows, but we make it work. And that's what these are. Sharp lines, tight windows in the NFL. So you take real life, you translate it to the football, strap in for a weekend all the way into Monday, like these guys said. I think you're going to get a special Guns appearance on Monday. So take advantage of it.
Not waiting around. I got the hat on last week. I joked and I said it was a troll hat. It is not a troll hat this afternoon. 4:30 in Kansas City. We got a lot of discussion on this game. Texans at Chiefs, round 2, where the Chiefs want to turn up and will turn up, but opening up with the total, throwing it to the odds fellow, under 42 midweek, 41.5 now.
Yep. That 42 might still be floating out there, but 41.5, stay above the 41. I think that's generally a key number when it comes to totals. But I love this, right? These are 2 defensive-minded teams, and that's probably not what you think about. You got Travis Kelce, you got Patty Mahomes, you got C.J. Stroud and a high-powered Texas offense with a lot of weapons. But these teams want to run the ball, and they want to rely on their defense, right? Even the passing game of the Kansas City Chiefs, it's not explosive plays. Can they break one? Yes. Can Mahomes scramble and do something crazy? Yes. We've all seen it. We've seen it for years, right? Don't doubt the playoff pedigree with these guys. But even their passing game that Andy Reid's designed is very kind of run-like oriented, right? It's quicker plays, screens, flares, things like that. And that's what you're going to continue seeing today. But really the focus here is we got a little bit of line functionality, and we got a lot to talk about on the defenses. One thing I love with the Houston Texans, and I think you saw this as the game got away, and last week Herbert and the Chargers were only up early, 3-0, then 6-0, right? They never really pulled away the way they should have, and then the pressure started coming, right? This Houston defensive line is not to be fucked with. First in pass rush win rate and second in run stop win rate. Now they come up against a little bit of a tougher matchup from a pass block win rate and a run block win rate, as the Kansas City Chiefs and that offensive line, which is getting healthier, is at 8th and 7th respectively. So I think you're going to see a good battle up front there, but the Texans do have the horses up front to get pressure, to make that ball move quickly out of Mahomes' hands. Another thing when you think about it in terms of the way these teams play, and just some statistics to key in on, and what's going to get you longer drives and kind of stretch this thing out a little bit. And I'll say last week too, just to pause, that game had no business going over last week. That was outlier pick sixes and BS. So that Texans-Chargers matchup, I think, even featured some of these stats that I'm rattling off right now about third downs, right? These teams are getting to third down often on their drives. And generally speaking, when it comes to the Chiefs, they're converting, right? So they're excellent again on third downs this season. They converted 48.5. That was 3rd in the league. So they're getting the 3rd, and then they're extending those drives and creating that length, right? So we're going to need some field goals. We're going to need some lengthy drives. We want to chew clock. Avoiding third downs completely has been an issue for Houston. They faced third down 49.6, almost 50% of their sets. That was 25th in the league, and they were 3rd in terms of how many times they were in a 3rd and long position. And that was 30th at 29.6%. Last week in that playoff game, they faced 3rd and long on 35.5% of their downs. That was the highest in the wild card round, right? So it was still even happening and they were converting, right? But when you look at it, they got points off the defensive, off what Herbert was doing. Things I don't expect Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs to do. So I like this thing to kind of stay in that mix, right? I think it's going to be a grind of a game. This is playoff football. This is 2 teams that have talent on defense. And the last piece, finally complete the puzzle, right? Don't underestimate what happened in the regular season. 27-19, the total was set at 43. This thing went over, and it is coming back down, right? It's tight. It's a tight window, but you do see enough of that movement for me coming back down. I think you're going to get the playoff atmosphere in Kansas City, and I love the under.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, they played going back only in recent history here. It was week 16, a Saturday game before Christmas, 27-19. That is 46. 3.5 line there. Very similar line. Odds fella on the under. Straight to guns. I got the head on. We the line on this play. Kansas City, I said I was trolling you last week. We're not trolling you now. We're buying you. Guns picks. Talk to me on this. Kansas City at -8.
Yeah, I think Shark and I jumped on it immediately when the line came out on Sunday, and we had to tell the people that we were going to collab on this one. But we talked about these 2 teams, 15-2. KC well rested, well prepared on this one, and bringing back some key guys from the injury report. Houston coming off a great win. I'll give it to them, but I think San Diego in the second half just kind of pooped on themselves. But they're 10-7 and going into this game. But KC is coming into this game, like I said, well rested, well prepared for a playoff run. Key guys coming back from the starters. And, they actually had virtually 3 weeks off because they didn't play the last game they didn't play the Denver game and, coming off the game prior to that. So they're like ready to go, as healthy as they've ever been all season long. Then you got Houston coming off back-to-back wins, including Tennessee. That was a revenge angle there in the second leg of their divisional game. And then they played then with nothing to play in the next game. Then they had the Chargers, which just basically crumbled in the second half. So don't take it with a grain of salt when you're looking at this Houston team. Prior to those games, then we really see who Houston truly is, right? A loss to Tennessee, 3-point win versus Jacksonville on the road. Jacksonville, one of the worst teams in the NFL. 8-point win versus a depleted Miami team with, that just really regressed during the end of the season, only putting up 182. Actually, Houston only put up 182 yards of total offense in that game and still won by 8. And then they had that loss to KC, then a 31-2 loss to Baltimore. So when we talk about 2 key playoff teams in KC and Baltimore, they lost by margin in both of those. So the perception of the KC Chiefs is their inability to cover spreads outside of the Denver game. But they played 3 straight. Now I'm throwing the Denver game out on the sheer fact that nobody played in that game. Okay, so that's just an outlier. Let's toss that out the window. Look at the games prior to that. 3 straight covers in both those games. So what you're seeing here is a KC team that is playing. It's almost like looking at Usain Bolt. I was like, he's not going to be running in the semifinals or the quarterfinals. He's going to be just getting enough to get to the dance. And then when the dance happens, you're going to see this team turn up. And I think we're seeing it here with the Kansas City Chiefs. And then you got to look at one of those covers. That was Houston. That's kind of the game that we're using as our connection with this bet. At home, they won 27-19. That odds alluded to. They outgained them 64 yards with a +2 turnover ratio in that game. So they virtually dominated them left and right in that game in Arrowhead. The line in that game, though, we have to look at the line, -3 in that one with a 42.5 line, I think it was for the total. Now you're seeing the total drop. However, you're seeing the line tick up to 8.5. You're seeing this line correlation here as I'm looking at the board right now, and I'm seeing 9 start to hit the board. And that's telling me all I need to know about what this game is perception-wise from the books. This is going to be a heavy win here for the Kansas City Chiefs. Andy Reid off a bye. You always want to take him. Pat Mahomes in the playoffs. You don't get rich by fading the Kansas City Chiefs. And then you got to look at the factor. Divisional games, 6-0, no interceptions, 16 touchdowns passing. This is a team Pat Mahomes just thrives in the divisional round. And then on the opposite side, Texans, I think they're 0-5 or 1-5 or something like that in divisional round games. Come on now. We're going to be taking the Kansas City Chiefs. I got -8. I take it at whatever number. This is going to be a double-digit win regardless. So Kansas City -8 is my play.
Yeah, completely aligned. And just jumping off some points of emphasis, obviously you said pretty much all the details. But I think when you're looking at this double-digit projection here, you have to go back to last year with the Texans. And you see this polarization in their home versus road abilities in the playoffs. Last year in round 1, they hammered Joe Flacco and the Browns 45-14. I then made the mistake last year of backing them on the road in the divisional round at Baltimore. Same line, plus 9.5, got blown out 34-10. And it really does speak to just a quality gap here. And as Guns mentioned, this is a great buy low on KC. We were telling you guys every single Sunday, for the most part, mid-season, fade KC in the regular season. This is just what this team does. They don't play huge in the regular season. They conserve energy. And then when it matters, they turn the hell up. 3-0 ATS last 3. If Mahomes played, as Guns mentioned, we're not counting Carson Wentz, the catastrophic road loss at Denver in week 18. But convincing win at Cleveland, 21-7. The game we were just discussing here against Houston, 27-19. And a really emphatic one in Pittsburgh on Christmas Day, 29-10. This is where this team will ball out. And if you look at CJ Stroud, we've talked about Stroud now for 2 seasons. He plays to moments. He's better at home. He's better as a home underdog. He's not great on the road. Texans this year, 3-5 ATS on the road, 1-3 ATS as a road underdog. Took a margin loss at Minnesota, 34-7. And of course, the game that was played against Kansas City here. And in terms of line functionality, Kansas City was actually a short 3.5 there, as Guns mentioned. This is at 8. I have them to win at the final by 13 points here. Buy it, live it, love it, and let's dominate. Next game here, 2 games on the card today.
Before you close this out, I got a prop I want to give out.
Oh, that's right.
Here.
Joe Mixon,
and it's a
talk
three-way.
to the gun.
Throw the 3-way around.
We're going to do a 3-way on this prop? Or
Yeah. No,
okay.
well, we should do a 3-way on the prop. Maybe I'll get involved. You convince us, but I'm also on the Chiefs, too.
Okay, gotcha. 3-way on the Chiefs. Let's talk about Joe Mixon here and what's going to happen in this game. You got KC with their strength is stopping the run. They're 7th in rushing yards per play, 5th in yards per game, 9th in rushing DVOA on the defensive side. And at home, they've actually performed better in their rush defense, 94 rushing yards per game given up at home. That ranks them 6th in the league. And then you got to look at Mixon. Right now, he's dealing with an ankle problem. He's banged up into this game. He's not going to be 100%. So I don't suspect him to pull out the performance that he did last week, which he put up 106 rushing yards versus the LA Chargers. But look at what he's done prior to that game. He's only surpassed 60 rushing yards twice out of his last 8 games. So really, as far as the offense is concerned, this Houston team hasn't really utilized Mixon in the running game. And then you got to look when he played Kansas City in the first matchup. He did have 57 rushing yards in that one. But I look at this as for a corollary standpoint. Mixon's season average, 74.8 rushing yards per game. His prop is set at 57.5, which gives you everything you need to know what the books are perceiving his production is going to be in this game. I just think with that ankle injury, he's not going to be an effective runner. I don't think he's going to surpass 100 plus rushing yards like he did yesterday. I'm sorry, in the last game. I think this is going to be a low rushing affair here. They're going to isolate Mixon and force CJ Stroud to pass the ball. And quite frankly, in the first matchup, he had 39 passing attempts versus his average where he averages 33 passing attempts. So maybe looking at an eyeball in the over on his passing attempts today for CJ Stroud. But I like Mixon here under his rushing prop here, 57.5 as a play.
Yeah, Sharp. Look, the prop got been crushing all season, not stopping today. 8 o'clock in Detroit. Massive divisional football game. Washington traveling to the Dome. A lot of conversation on this game. I think this game really could go one of 2 ways. This really could be a complete blowout, or Detroit's high variance style could potentially come back to bite them a little bit. Obviously, going forward on almost every single 4th down, really do create a lot of variance. Gunn has picked up on that. And for that reason, he is putting the Lions in a teaser at -2.5 with the Chiefs also -2.5. Guns picks. Talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, I do like Detroit today. I honestly do. I think there is a path to them, especially in having that rest coming into this game. Dan Campbell, the team's a lot healthier than they have been since the past like 4 or 5 weeks. So and getting key guys in there, I think this is probably a Detroit play, but I'm playing on the safer side on this one, and I'm looking at a teaser. Reason being is I found an 8.5 on DraftKings. You take it down to 6, you get it past the 7 and the 3, gets you to -2.5, and you can do the same thing with the KC on this one, where you can get it past the key numbers 7 and 3 down to -2.5. And if you think both these teams are going to win, I think both teams are going to win by more than 3 points. So I just want to give the matchup here a little bit of statistics on this one. What you know about Washington, granted, their running game has really regressed. We saw it against Tampa last week. I think they only put up like 60 or 70 yards of rushing. But this is a team that relies on the rushing game as their production, right? 5th in yards per play, 4th in rushing attempts per game, 3rd in rushing yards per game, 4th in rushing touchdowns per game. And then on the Detroit team, well, one thing you're not going to be doing is running on this team, because they are 4th in opposing rushing yards per game, 1st in opposing rush attempts per game. So really what Washington really wants to do to stay productive on the offensive side, Detroit is fully capable of making those stops and making this team one-dimensional. Jaden Daniels, rookie quarterback, throwing the ball virtually 75% of the game, maybe more, who knows. But when you look at the offensive side, it doesn't matter what Detroit does. You can tell them to pass, you can tell them to run. I think they'd rather run. They're 3rd in rushing attempts per game, but they're 9th in rushing yards per play, 5th in rushing yards per game, 2nd in rushing touchdowns per game. So this is a team that can run. And the one thing that you know about this Washington defense is they are very terrible at stopping the run. They were ranked near the bottom in most statistical categories as far as rushing defense is concerned. But then you got to look at Detroit defense. Really looked good in the previous game. And this may be something that we'll see. I don't know if it's a pattern yet, but we saw it versus this Minnesota team. They held them to 142 passing yards and 262 yards of total offense last week. And that might be, they got a lot of guys back that are healthier, ready for a playoff run. But I want to see a little bit of a sample size on this one, because in the previous 3 games, they gave up 300 plus in the passing game to their opponents. But numerically, it kind of fits what Detroit has excelled at all year. When you look at the numbers, 4-2 ATS as a favorite to 7 points or more, 6-3 ATS when the total is 50 or more, which it is in this one. Also, just look non-divisional opponents since 2023, 19-6 ATS. So this is a team that doesn't matter if it's public, if it's square, whatever. They find ways to get covers here with Dan Campbell and the boys. Then the total take on this one is a little bit tough for me because really it's 50-50 as far as I think Oddsfellow will have a take on this one. But when I read it, I looked at it more as you could have them go under like you had against Minnesota when the total was really high, or you could have them go over. They're kind of a mix on that one with the Detroit. I think on the Washington side of the ball, they're more leaning toward the over when the total is high. So it's kind of a tough scenario here. Nothing I want to get involved with, because there's a yin and a yang, or a pro and a con from both sides. But I think the teaser is the best way to play this. So the way I'm going to do this one, I'm going to take Detroit here. I think they're going to be able to dominate by a possession or more. Same thing with Kansas City, and I'm going to tease it down to 2.5 on both sides. So give me Detroit, KC, 6-point teaser as the play.
Yeah, and as I said when we started talking about this game, in my opinion, does have the ability to open up. If you look at how Detroit has played at home as a significant favorite, only a couple games in this numerical range, and I think it's fairly interesting. The books think that Washington is basically in the range of Jacksonville and Tennessee, at a double-digit underdog at open in this stadium. And when Detroit played these teams at home, Tennessee and Jacksonville, 52-14, 52-6. We're not saying that's going to happen, but that's kind of what the books are suggesting with this line. This is a margin line. As I said, however, I don't entirely trust Detroit because of their high variance style. And we've seen this historically in round 2. The 1 seed off a bye catches a team that played the previous week, is in flow, is scrappy, and somehow loses at home. We saw the Ravens do it in Lamar Jackson's first playoffs. We saw the Cowboys do it numerous times in round 2, and the list goes on. I love Detroit. We have loved Detroit for years on this show, buying them when nobody believed in them, when they could barely win a game, and they started this incredible ATS run, of course, now culminating with the 1 seed in the NFC. But I do feel like this Washington group has that ability to keep it close in a weird way. Any thoughts on this one?
No, I mean, I kind of lean that way. You know, I like the teaser option because I do think Detroit's going to get it done. You could maybe have Jaden Daniels finally the clock strikes midnight on him and this offense a little bit, but they've been a great offense all year. And if you looked at some of these games, they hung around against the Eagles. They came back and beat them. They hung around enough against the Bears. The Hail Mary should have never happened. But in a lot of these games, even if they didn't come all the way back, they were covering the spread too. So from an ATS standpoint, Washington's just been, really interesting. They're 11-6-1 ATS against what we know as the Lions juggernaut, 12-4-1, right? So something has to give, but it's a tough line for that because to me, the back door is completely open. I could see a 13, 14 point, Lions lead at that point. Maybe they step on their throat early, maybe Jaden Daniels struggles, but all you need is that one garbage field goal or that one garbage touchdown, which I think they're fully capable of getting, right? So that's my look on the game. I would actually lean to Washington in the points. I like the tease angle because I do think Detroit's going to get out of it. I think they have too much talent. We talked about the total before. It's so tough to see a playoff game at 55.5, right? That should tell you, all right, I got to take the over, right? And that's where I would lean. I think what's taking me off of that, because most of the stats back it up, is both of these teams are not awful on defense. Like defensively, points per game, I think Detroit's given up like 20.1. They've shaped up even with some of the injuries, and Washington's sitting there at 22.8 with a defensive-minded coach and Dan Quinn. So they can get stops when they need it. From an offensive standpoint, right? These teams are powerhouses. 33.2 points per game for Detroit and 28.2, which is first and fifth in the league for Washington. So that obviously averaged out to like a 61.5, kind of look. But what's tough for me and why I'm staying off of it pregame, this is one I'll probably sit back and enjoy betting live. I think you could potentially tease this either way. I would lean towards, teasing it with Detroit and not teasing Washington up just to protect yourself from that blowout factor. But on the total itself, what really turned me off, and this is something the three of us have talked a lot about, it's the outlier stuff. It's these two coaches are going to be super aggressive, which could work in your favor and could completely backfire. And to be completely honest, it's to me a big reason why the Tampa-Washington game didn't go over last week. They were a couple times they didn't take field goals. They went for it on fourth down. Sometimes again, towards the end of the game, it looked like that might work in our favor, but ultimately these teams were not converting enough of those drives or those situations into points. And with these two coaches today, the way Campbell's wired, you could have the exact same scenario, and 55.5 is even different than what were we laying, 47, 48. So it makes it even harder, right, to kind of stay on that trajectory. So it's live betting for me. I hope Guns gets out of there with the tease win.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Washington on the road, as much as I'm saying Detroit could somehow give this away, I think Washington is actually a great sell point on the road as well, and that's why this line is so heavy. Washington had some success early season on the road, but they caught Cincinnati napping in week 3. They beat Arizona. Arizona, obviously highly inconsistent all year. Really the only spot that you could even kind of correlate this to as a significant underdog point for Washington on the road was week 6 at Baltimore. They were catching 6.5 points. They did lose 30-23, and it did go over, actually. That was a 51 or a 52 line. So as you said, tight stuff. They covered by a hook, and it went over by a point. This is NFL football for you. But I don't think they exist particularly well in this environment. And we saw it last week. Tampa Bay just played a very poor football game. It wasn't that Washington was so overly impressive. And as you said, these coaches just going for it every single time in the red zone. There's no field goals anymore almost. So there's so much variance. The over is absolutely the number. I haven't gotten there yet. Clearly, I do think there's a gamble to it. But Guns, any further comments?
Yeah, you really took the words out of my mouth on that one. Is like, you look at this team, it's like 3 straight road games, 5 straight games where they played right down to the wire between a possession or less, and the ball could have bounced one way or the other, and you could have a different outcome in those games. But you said it best. They had back-to-back road games, Cincinnati, Arizona. They won those games. Then they got a home game at Cleveland. Then they went on the road in a similar line fashion against a Baltimore team where it was like +7. And then, of course, the over and under kind of like just barely got over. And I think it pushed on if you got the closing line at 7. Mm-hmm. But the first half could be a look on this one, because if I remember from that game, from the Washington-Baltimore game, I said take the first half in the Baltimore game. They were coming off a loss. And they were just ready to just go out there and do a thumping. And they did. And they did go over that one. So maybe there is some functionality in here. I'm seeing -6.5 on an 8.5, 9 line. So that's over 60%. That's enough to probably take a look at the first half. And a lot of these teams, especially coming off the bye, going into the playoffs, these number 1 seeds, they tend to come out swing it in the first half, and then things kind of get adjusted. Sometimes it goes one way or the other in the second half. Maybe you look towards the first half on this one, similar to what we saw in the Baltimore game with Washington, even though Washington fought through and through. But yeah, I mean, you could see a possession, or you could see Detroit up like 14, and then they just get a garbage touchdown or something like that, kill the spread on the full game. But there's ways to play this that you can manipulate the line one way or the other. I gave you the teaser option, but also you could take advantage of getting a Detroit team in the first half under a 7. And I think that's probably another way to look at this game.
Yeah, and just going further on the Washington, I'm looking at their schedule here now. They actually, in recent history, have not been particularly impressive on the road. Took a margin loss at Philadelphia week 11 by 8 Thursday Night Football. Played a very poor second half to almost lose outright in New Orleans to Spencer Rattler and Jake Hayner in week 15. I mean, that was a disastrous second half there. And then week 18 at Dallas, barely won, but the backups played. So Washington actually has only played 3 true road games with the starters since week 7. Only 3. So they've barely been on the road at all. It's a ton of home games, a ton of bottom feeders, and they haven't performed particularly well on the road. I think this is truthfully where there's probably a quality check here for rookie quarterbacks. You're seeing this. Daniels now going road game 2 in the playoffs. Didn't play elite football last week. It's probably where the quality gets checked here. We're talking ourselves more onto the Detroit side here as we go. As much as I think Detroit has maybe like out of 100 outcomes, maybe like 5 out of 100 outliers, I think 95 out of 100 speaks to some sort of dominance. And our guy Sean says Washington allows a 67% opponent fourth down conversion rate. I did not know that. Thank you for that.
And that's Dan Campbell. You know, he hates punting.
Maybe the over back in play.
And talking about the market of playoff football, we don't really look at this type of stuff very often, but I think you can correlate this here, where you've seen a cluster of unders in the playoffs so far. It's going to pop the other direction at some point. It's not team X, team Y. It's a league thing. It's kind of like in baseball where you see a ton of unders, and then all of a sudden in like May, it just every game's like 10-8 out of nowhere. They're talking about the balls are juiced and this whole thing. It has nothing to do with this, but I think that there's going to be a league-wide pop in points in some of these games in the second round. And we will be talking about that tomorrow in the biggest game, in my opinion, of this entire round, Ravens-Bills tomorrow night. And that's going to close it out for this one. 30 minutes in the books. The Extra Points, where we bring you the extra points on NFL football. My top play, the buy hat is engaged. Kansas City, minus 7.5 early week, 8.5 now. That is a 3-way collaboration. The Odds Fellow and the Gun. Gun also on a teaser. Detroit minus 2.5, KC minus 2.5, and Joe Mixon under 57.5 rush yards. We appreciate you guys immensely. Have a great Saturday. As Guns mentioned, we got over 100 college basketball games on. It is January. It is the divisional round. High-quality football to be seen today. Let's dominate this card. 4 odds, Guns picks. Pleasure as always. Close them out with some words, and let's dominate.
Come on, let's get that hype up, guys. Let's go. Come on now. There we go. We're going to have ourselves a beautiful Saturday. College basketball. You said it, Shark. And I just dropped all my plays on Dub Club. You want to go check that out? Just grab the card there. It is dirt cheap today. We're going to do that. Also, National Championship pick will be out today, and I'll have a special offer for anybody that wants to grab that pick here early. I will have side and total in that game look. And we're going to break down the game on Monday with myself and the Shark. And I may have my face painted, and I might be dressed as a leprechaun. I don't know. We shall see. But that's going to do it here obviously make sure you check us out on X, the Guns Picks, not the Guns Picks, Guns Picks, Sharks in Sports 88, and the Odds Fellow on X. And then check out and like and subscribe to the Guns Picks channel and the Sharky Waters Nation channel on YouTube. But that's going to do it here until tomorrow, where we're going to break down the NFL Sunday divisional round at 1 p.m. So put it on your calendars, hit the notification button, and you will know when we go live. That's going to do it here for the Extra Points. I am Guns Picks. Let's cash some tickets. Let's dominate the ball. And as always, and let's keep dancing, baby. Bang!